I'm Bassil El Masri. I'm an assistant professor at Murray State University. I'm part of the soccer team, which is about the carbon cycle in the forest, the grass, the agriculture. So we're using the knowledge that we have in order to know what these ecosystems are responding to changes, how they can be better managed, and also looking in terms of the future if that has an impact on species, also for bird habitat, for many other things that the forest or the grass provide, or even ag in terms of productivity, food products for people later. So this is kind of like look at every aspect of where the carbon is going in that system in order to get better decision about what we need to manage our system for the future and keep it sustainable. So the SUCCR 2, the second state of the carbon cycle report, is an extension of the first report that came in 2007, trying to understand what happened also with the carbon cycle and understanding also the impact of land cover, human activities there in terms of the natural system, the agricultural system, and see where we are in 10 years, what have changed and what might not have changed. Is it sustainable? We have a dramatic change, or are there positive things that we might be able to lead on for the next report? And it's mostly that has many things related to sustaining the ecosystem and what threats we have now, natural and human-made threats to the natural ecosystems as well as the agricultural ecosystem in the North America. So we're part of the report also we look in terms of the CO2 as emitted by human activities as it goes to the atmosphere, where it's going after that. And so part of it is it can be taken by the plants, whether they are crops or trees or grass. It can be stored in the soils, in the trunks of the trees. They are made of carbon, the roots and so on. So we are trying also here to see if we have more CO2 in the atmosphere, where that CO2 goes. Will the plant take that extra CO2? Will the soil take that extra CO2 from the atmosphere? Will it take it in? Or will they not respond to that? Will they shift and say, our behavior is different even if you give us CO2, but we're not going to take it? So that's the understanding here. We're trying to see how for the future, if we continue that emissions, where it's going to go. It has to go somewhere. And if we don't want it to be in the atmosphere, we hope the vegetation continues to take that extra CO2 and transform it to different forms and maybe store it in the soil, and that will have elevate the impact of CO2 in the atmosphere. So that means we take it from the atmosphere, put it in the soil, that will have an impact on the global warming. So I'm going to take a minute here just to talk about the chapter I was involved with, the Grassland chapter, and our finding in terms of what's happening with the increase of CO2 in the atmosphere and increase in temperature due to climate change. So we find until 2050, some projections we have that now and until 2050, grasslands in the US, Canada and Mexico, the North America, they are continue to take CO2 from the atmosphere to build their structure and to store it there. But we have confidence that also that increase or that extra sequestration might slow down with future as we go to 2050 and 2100. And part of that could be land cover change, as most of that grassland areas could be converted to agriculture, or even woody invasion of shrubs to that area will change all the cycle due to fire suppression in those areas. So now when we look at the increase in CO2, the plants don't interact with it sometimes like a direct way. We give it more CO2 to the atmosphere that they will take it because there's other environmental things that impact the plant response. But we see that as we give the plant more CO2, if there is CO2 in the atmosphere, they can take more carbon. But if the precipitation for the grassland is an important factor, if it's drier, they're not going to take that much extra carbon from the atmosphere. If it's wetter, then they are going to take more. They can be more active. You know, they are greener. As you see it in many of those areas, they respond quickly to rain. They dry, and when the rain comes, they boom back again. So that's one uncertainty we have, is what will happen with precipitation if we have areas that is going to dry. Then we don't expect that they will take more CO2 from the atmosphere. So in terms of management, we do see that if we do moderate grazing in those areas, not extensive grazing, we can preserve that ecosystem, taking more CO2 from the atmosphere and storing more soil carbon in the soils compared if we have extensive grazing activities. So the management of those, also many of those grassland areas are used for grazing. That management practice will have an impact on how much they will respond to that change in the CO2 in the atmosphere, how much they can take more of that CO2, where they are going to store it. And so also fire, changes in the fire suppression there is changing them to a different species. So that have kind of a threat. When you convert that grass to be more of a shrubland, then you're changing habitat for animals and will have an impact also in human activities there, as well as animal other habitats there that they might lose. Some species might have being impacted by losing that grassland to shrublands and so on. Yeah. So the SACR 2 report is a comprehensive assessment of everything we know about what's happening in the carbon cycle from going from the atmosphere with the increased CO2 to the different type of vegetation, whether we looked at forest, we looked at the grass. There's chapters related to wetlands, forest, agriculture. So you can, if you're interested in looking at the report, you can go to globalchange.gov and you will be able to see all the report there and check it out and see also its impact on human activities and recreation and activities for people and habitats for animals and so on.